And hi, I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Paul Ma, and I'm the executive editor at w.media. And I'm not here to share with you what I think happened, but I have my wonderful panelists who are the experts in this field. And why don't we go down the list and y'all can just have a quick 1-minute introduction about yourself.
Thank you, Paul. Assalamualaikum. Very good morning. My name is Murdani. I'm from MDEC, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, under Ministry of Digital. So our mandate is to drive digital economy. Obviously, this is a topic that of interest to us in terms of building the right foundation for the country to grow and aspire to be one of the leaders in ASEAN in digital economy. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm from CLSA. For those of you who don't know, CLSA is loosely categorized as an Asian investment bank with businesses from Japan all the way to India, from China all the way to Australia. We are owned by a Chinese state-owned enterprise called CITIC Securities, which is the largest securities firm in China. It has pretty ambitious growth plans across Asia with offices in the US and London also. Businesses involve institutional equities, derivatives, wealth management, investment banking, but I come to you today from an institutional equities background. We advise investors who look at stocks in Malaysia across different sectors, and these investors could be domestic investors and could be international investors. Data center is a theme for the market, or has been a theme for the market for the last 2 years. So it's something that's clearly front and center in the minds of investors when they look at the Malaysian stock market.
Good morning all. My name is Mahathir from TM Nxera. As the name says, it's a joint venture company between Telekom Malaysia and Nxera, which is a unit under Singtel. And we are in the midst of developing a data center campus in near EduCity, Sekadar Puteri. We have a plan to develop about 200 plus megawatt of IT load. And currently the first building is already under construction now, have started the constructions. So, by the way, I'm not the featured speaker, not supposed to be speaking today, but yeah, Bidan terjun for this morning. And
thank you for coming in at the last minute, and we really appreciate that. But I won't consider you second-tier speaker, right? Because you are a big developer in Johor right now. So I think we have a good mix: data center, finance, and of course MDEC here. All right. So are you ready to go? Okay. All right. So now my first question here today is this, right? Today, Malaysia is being called the next epicenter of Asia's digital economy. And you remember the chart earlier on, right? I mean, before 2025 was way lower capacity. So something has happened. So what happened? Feel free to jump in. Or maybe Joe, you want to tell us from finance angle before we hear from the rest?
Yeah, so let me give you a bit of background of the Malaysian market and how data centers has affected it. I think the Malaysian stock market has been relatively stable and with a very few changes in themes, in stories, in drivers of the market. So the data center thematic, which came up about 2 years ago, has really captured the attention of investors in the Malaysian market. It's also attracted foreign investors in the market. So it's front and center in a lot of our conversations with clients, both domestically and globally. And why is it important, and how has it had knock-on effects on the market? It's actually manifold. From the construction companies, they have seen order books double, triple, with each 1 to 2 billion order. From property companies, they have made not a small amount of money selling land to data centers. From utility companies, which ultimately all these data centers will have to buy power from. And lastly, there is an AI tech thematic going around the world. And this, the data center area is one that will also garner AI attention. I mean, to give all of you an example, it's just a refresher, but to give you some context, the large AI names in the US, the likes of NVIDIA, the likes of AMD, Broadcom, have performed amazingly well. If you just whip out your phone and look up Google and look at stock prices, you'll see what I mean. Now, this has had far-reaching implications and has impacted stocks around the world. And these companies have actually done really well in terms of earnings too. I mean, in Asia, I'll give you an example of TSMC. This is a 1.5 trillion US dollar market cap stock in Taiwan. Now, it's a huge number, but just to give you some idea, since you're in Malaysia, the largest market cap stock in Malaysia is Maybank. It's an 80 billion US Sorry, it's a 30 billion US market cap company. This is a 1.5 trillion US market cap company in Taiwan. And the last quarter, it grew earnings 39%. Just pause and think about it. That's a staggering number. A huge company growing earnings 39%. And this is why it's captured investor attention. If such a huge company can grow at such a fast pace, who else benefits? Who supplies to it? Will this continue? So a lot of questions in that respect. And in Malaysia, there's also a search for companies that supply to this AI thematic. Data centers is sort of linked to that because ultimately, if there's a great AI demand, data centers will be in demand too. Data centers can move up into AI. So that's why I think there's been a lot of attention from investors. That's why people have talked about it a lot, and that's why stocks have rallied. I mean, the construction companies, a good example, are up 30% in Malaysia over the last 1 year. So everyone wants to make money, right? Let's be honest. So people are thinking about how to do it next and where to put money to work. So that's a quick snapshot of how finance looks at data centers.
Yeah. And that's why I should have gone back in time and buy Bitcoin and NVIDIA, right? So we have a talk later, Joe, about what to buy next, okay? I need to plan for retirement.
Yes, I think just to circle back, I think we have to go back to the early days of decision that has been made by the government in terms of where do we put Malaysia on the roadmap. I don't really like the notion of Malaysia is a spillover effect of moratorium of Singapore. I think that kind of narrative may not be right at this point of time, because I think the shift will happen anyway sooner or later. But what was the right decision made back then was to put resources and priorities to make sure that we can attract this kind of investments into Malaysia. Because it wasn't an easy task 10 years ago. It was so hard to bring a catalytic investors to Malaysia because there's no validation, there is no assessment that would give the comfortable notion of the investors to put the money in Malaysia for, because once you invest in Malaysia, it's a deep-rooted kind of capital invested in a particular new market. At the time, Malaysia was a new market. So in that sense, I think coupled with the universe of the richness of the ecosystem, the timing that comes together at that time, where we managed to attract catalytic investors to come to Malaysia, and you see that it is a phenomenal growth in terms of the capacity, in terms of the power consumption, and things like that. So that actually gave us a right runway for us to be able to manage the investments. In those days, we have been receiving investments, a lot of investment, but now it gives us a break or a time for us to undergo a correction in terms of what kind of high value investment that we want to promote, and is there any priority that we want to put in. So now the day is about managing and sustaining these investments. So again, when you started this thing last time, bringing in the top 5 hyperscalers to make sure that was the right decision, but now with the AI coming in, and how do we to make sure that those investments are translated into the impact to the ecosystem. For example, right, if you're bringing hyperscalers in Malaysia, then how do we make sure that those hyperscalers then will be able to offer something that our SMEs will be impacted by this thing. For example, like compute power and things like that. So if you look in the overall ecosystem development, bringing investment is one objective of us putting Malaysia like that. But we look at the bigger picture, ASEAN, for example, like if $1 trillion size of digital economy in 2030, that would give us the impetus for us to be the landing point or to be the hub for us to serve that kind of thing. And at the same time, growing our ecosystem, because that will drive the adoption, and that will put Malaysia into the right path of achieving 30% of GDP contribution by digital economy by 2030. So you look at all, I think we are at the right stage, we are the right timing for us to be able to pivot what are the priorities that we have to put in to make sure that we can sustain this thing.
So I guess what you're saying really is that this didn't happen overnight, right? So what we are seeing now is the fruits of the work that organizations like MDEC and the rest of the, all the Malaysia agencies have worked hand in hand to bring in these investments over the last 3, 5, 10 years, such that when the time was right, suddenly Malaysia was able to sustain or attract this surge of investments. And similarly, you're saying that if you look ahead, there is a lot more investments out there in the APAC market in general, right? Or in ASEAN. And Malaysia should hence prepare itself for the next surge of growth as well, rather than just being content to stay where you are right now. Is it a good summary of what you shared? Thank you so much, Mahathir.
Yeah, if I can add a bit, echoing what Murdani mentioned just now. Yeah, TM at that time, probably about 10 years ago, we took the opportunity or took the decision to set up what was called Twin Core Data Center with the construction project in
I remember that one.
Yes, and at that time, people are not talking about the hyperscale as what we are seeing today. Yeah, and TM being among the first ones, we can call that a mega data center, mega DC. Started off with a project in Iskandar Putri, Nusa Jaya Tech Park, and then in Cyberjaya. But of course, I think doing it ahead of time also took a bit of a hit for TM because it took us a while to get all the tenants in. And we did a lot of efforts at TM side, did a lot of efforts. And not long after that, we saw a lot of traffic, a lot of capacity demands coming in, such that we started to see a lot more players setting up facilities and infrastructure in Malaysia. And part of that, I suppose, is also the efforts from the agencies such as MDEC, such as TM, who have been aspiring to bring a digital Malaysia to the world. Yeah, and now with MDEC's Malaysia Digital Status also helps in terms of that progress. And now we are seeing a large, even hyperscale kind of data center. Yeah. 20 megawatt, those days was considered huge. Nowadays, when projects announce 20 megawatt, I think we are also, it's not considered large anymore, even though in terms of investment, it's actually a large sum of money. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So this is the rosy picture that's happening right now, and what we have found out is that it didn't happen overnight. It was the effort of years of groundwork, years of foresight and investments to bring in these initial investors that gave the confidence to later waves to just jump straight into Malaysia. Okay, so things are going good now, but let's look ahead a little bit, right? So as we know right now, there is land costs is rising, surprise, because everyone is snapping up the land, right? So the evolving tax regimes that's been happening, so we know that there's been various cost increases to electricity, to water, and potentially in the future there might be fuel surcharges. So things are changing and not staying still, right? And of course, we know that there's also new regulations. And as I said earlier, a lot of these regulations, we need them, right? Because we need to protect the land, we need to protect the resources in terms of water, in terms of other areas of sustainability and so on. So, but having said that, right, all this all adds to the cost. And investors are asking whether Malaysia is as predictable as before. So, what do you all think? Maybe, Joe, I see you're ready to go.
Yes, Paul. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think on the ground, while the construction, a lot of data centers are continuing, while data centers are excited about getting new customers, the market tends to look forward. So from an investor standpoint, people are thinking, okay, it's actually a lot more, the equation to build a data center in Johor in Malaysia is a lot more difficult these days. Land prices in Johor have doubled, tripled over the last 3 to 5 years, depending on which area you've come from, and albeit from a lower base. Electricity prices just went up 15% in the middle of the year. Resources are becoming more and more difficult to get a hold of. Water is a good example for cooling. And I believe the government themselves, and correct me if I'm wrong, Murdani, but the government is also thinking about the multiplier effect of data centers. Yes, there's a lot of money coming in at the start, but does it generate new jobs? Does it generate townships? Does it have a multiplier effect on the economy? So it's a more difficult equation going forward. Looking at the market, looking at stocks, similar sort of situation. And I use the construction sector as an example. A construction company that's seen its order book double from 4 billion to 8 billion. Stock prices have risen. Now the market is asking, can 8 billion go to 16 billion to generate the same sort of momentum in stock price? Now that's a big ask. 4 to 8, okay, 8 to 16, that's huge. So there's a lot of questions around that. There are questions around, can property companies continue to generate profits from land sales because there are fewer pieces of land, they're more expensive, data centers themselves are thinking maybe there's too much supply. So there's a different dynamic now. So I think, Paul, you're absolutely right. It's not as clear-cut an equation. There are competitors in the region, Bangkok, Batam, getting their fair share of inquiries for data centers. And from an investor standpoint also, people are thinking a lot harder on how to put the additional investment dollar to work in Malaysia if the DC theme continues.
Just a quick one on that thing. I think the tax incentive is changing. Now it's going to be outcome-based kind of thing. We used to have a zero tax front-loaded at the point of investments, but now it's going to be a tax that will be reducing based on the outcome delivered in terms of economic impact. So the financial modeling of the investors are changing because now the cost of the land is rising, but not only is rising, but the developers are being selective in terms of what kind of values that, if they sell that land, then what kind of values that they bring into the development. So it's a different financial modeling, and then also in terms of the non-fiscal incentives such as import duties, anything like that. Again, in those days, it was a catalytic pull factor that the government has to put in to make sure that we can hit the critical mass. Now the critical mass has been hit, so some of the investment has to be spread between the incentive and also the investment that has to be made by the investor to make sure that if one day they establish a footprint in particular market like Malaysia, then there is need for them to look at the 20-30 years outlook. Again, we have been given the new ultra high voltage rate by TNB. But again, to my earlier point, there must be a corrective measures to make sure that, because all sectors are racing for the same resources, then you look at the overall economic development of the country, so you have to look at the multiplier effect, indirect and indirect. So again, everybody has to compete on the level playing field when the particular industry has reached to certain maturity. So again, this is a journey that every new economic sectors have to undergo once they have reached a certain maturity, because we need to be fair to all other sectors that are contributing to the economy as well. So that must stay on that thing.
Right. So no doubt that it will be, how should we say, the situation now is different from 3 years ago when it's considered a new sector with a lot more front-loaded tax incentive and so on. But what you're saying is, I guess, Murdani, is that the playing field is level for all players. It's publicized, it's open, and obviously it's up. The onus is on the developers to come in with their eyes open to decide how they can best position themselves.
But it's not. I'm discouraging investment. Investment is contribute to be. We are encouraging this kind of investment, not that we are discouraging. But the dynamic of it is going to be different.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
If I can add a bit on that one, I mean, as business entities, we just need to run our businesses responsibly. Yeah. Being TM Nxera set up between a Malaysian entity and a Singapore entity operating in Johor, we need to see how, because it has to be a win-win situation for all. Yeah. Of course, as the industry started to develop, more incentives should be given to set up. But as business entities, we should also see what will be our contribution to the spurring the growth of the country as well. So in Malaysia, obviously, we want to have the people within the nation also improves in terms of the skill sets, yeah, talent development. How do we contribute to the talent development of the people in terms of the supply chain? What do we put? Of course, this has to work hand in hand between businesses and also regulators and government agencies in terms of how to bring the ecosystems in country as well, yeah, from manufacturing, from support and so on. So I suppose these things has to work together, and if we have that responsibility for a win-win situation in mind when we go in and start investing, I think we will work together to find amicable solutions for both that supports the growth of the DC industry in Malaysia, as well as giving or returning back to the nation in terms of growing the country to the future.
You know, Mahathir, you kind of answered my next and my final question, really. You talk about skill sets, right? Because my last question really is, Malaysia's no longer alone in this search of data center growth, right? I mean, regional nations like Thailand and even further afield, Japan, they are starting to roll out the red carpet for data centers. Development is happening. They're starting to try to attract new investments, right? So what unique advantages does Malaysia hold right now? And what do we need to protect, right, in order to move Malaysia into the true regional data center hub, data economy? So what do you think? So you mentioned skill sets. Mahathir, to add something else to it, or?
Yeah, in terms of, that's where I suppose we were talking, I was part of the industry advisory panel for one of the university in Bangi, and we were talking about how can we develop further in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the research and development aspect, yeah, to bring better efficiency, to equip people or students that are ready to enter the job market, to support the industry. Again, here, data center is not just, as normal in industry, it's not just one specific discipline. Yeah, I came from the electrical electronic background, but to run a successful data center industry, we need people from mechanical engineering background, from civil and structure background, the business people and so on. So if we put in these efforts together in terms of how do we see this can bring into a greater competencies to support the industry, I think that would be great. So I suppose I've touched on the talent part. Maybe the rest can add on that.
So I think government itself consuming data center resources, I think that would be quite a positive sign for the whole industry. And I quote the recent budget for 2026 where 2 billion ringgit has been allocated for sovereign AI cloud, which I think is an encouraging sign for all the hyperscalers and all the data centers in Malaysia that the government itself is consuming, putting aside plans for, putting aside budget for this. Because the next sort of point is data security, and I think that's why quite a few data centers have set up in Malaysia, because a lot of sensitive areas, government being one of them, banks being the other one, you want the data to sit in Malaysia, not leak out to any other country. So that is, I think, important, data security, having data sitting in Malaysia, and I think that will also spur investment in DCs in Malaysia.
So I guess if I may to just surmise, Joe, you're saying that internal consumption is one aspect that can actually continue to expand and grow the sector. And what's the next point is?
Data security is important.
Yeah. So data sovereignty, right? Because increasingly people are getting aware that they don't just want their data in a data center somewhere. They prefer to have it in a data center in town or within the geographical border of the country as well. So I guess these are factors. That means really, Joe, you're advocating the growth of the digital sector, isn't it? Because the digital sector will consume data centers.
Yeah, so I think it's important. There should be long-term growth in this area. And I think that's also important for data centers in Malaysia. So yes, you can be a regional hub, but don't forget local consumption. I think that's the point I was trying to make.
So Murdani, just nice for you.
I think just to echo what Joe said just now, first is the digitalization effort by the government, because it is very important for the government at this point of time to try to diffuse the demand, to make it adoption affordable, pervasive, and ubiquitous. So in doing so, if we are able to open up the certain high growth sectors who can adopt easily, that will create a market to the services and infrastructure that have been brought in by the investors. So I think that is the unique proposition that government is putting on the table to make sure that once you are in Malaysia, that means we are doing everything to make sure that the market is competitive enough for them to be able to tap into that thing. So by public sectors, financial services, so those are the key heavy users of digital services that will open up the opportunities for the investors to tap into it. And secondly, it's in terms of creating that opportunities along the value chain. As we embark on the initiative to get SMEs to be able to undergo digital transformation, that's where the solutions, services that can be put on the table from the supply perspective into the demand. So those are the critical factors to drive the demand that would create the opportunities for revenue generation by the investors. Because they make assessment in Malaysia, then there must be a reason for them to be investing in Malaysia. There must be return on investment, I think. And secondly, it's in terms of policies. I think as a government, we have a whole of government approach in terms of getting all the relevant key stakeholders, the like of MITI, Ministry of Digital, MIDA, MDEC, and all the peripheral services such as TMB and the like. So those are the stakeholders that are coming together, having the right single mindset, whole of nation approach to really understand and also to really pivot Malaysia of becoming a preferred high-value digital investments into Malaysia. So that is the promises in the top of the houses in terms of making sure. And we work closely with the state as well, Selangor, Johor, because we don't look at Johor. Johor has different natural advantages compared to Selangor. There must be a reason why investors want to be close to Singapore or want to be in the central business district. So we want to make sure that regional balancing of regional development is a key to make sure that investments are felt at all levels, at all locations, to make sure that it can give the benefits for all Malaysians. Those are the two things I think the offering value proposition that we are putting on the table to make sure that we can grow this sector and sustain this sector to make sure all people, citizens, businesses are going to be impacted as part of the digital journey. Thanks.
I mean, it sounds to me that there's so much more that can be done, right? I mean, on one hand, we look at the data center, we see it as a pure infrastructure play. But what Murdani, you're saying is that there's a lot more, right? For example, if you could develop the finance sector, that will feed demand for even more data center within the country, because the banks will care about where the data is kept, right? So that will help. You know, obviously the cloud sector is one thing, and then further on, there's also the whole value chain, right? Right now, a certain percentage of data center equipment are built in Malaysia, but I imagine that can be, if that is increased, then the value to Malaysia will actually increase substantially as well, right? And so it looks like we are, if you look at it from that point of view, you're saying that we're actually at the start of the journey, right? It's not the end, it's not just a raw capacity game, but it's about how the government, the economy, the agencies can work together with the industry to develop the sector in lockstep, right? To grow together. You know, they always say the rising tide lifts all boats, right? So how can we grow together that everybody is able to benefit from this growth? And in that context, we are really at the start of a brave new world, a fantastic new journey, right? And maybe our time is almost up, but maybe just one last final question, right? And maybe just, I want you to visualize, right, the next 3 to 5 years. Where do you see Malaysia's data center economy, right, headed towards? So maybe just give you 10 seconds to think about it. What to invest in? Joe is smiling away.
So, okay, I will always put the ASEAN perspective as the end game for this thing. I said earlier, $1 trillion market size, digital economic capability, and also Malaysia is an open economy kind of trading nation with trade to GDP ratio of 130%. Then we want to make sure that Malaysia has what it takes not only to serve domestic market, but it will be a good location for it to be the choices of the investment location for those investors who are looking at the regional outlook.
So I'm positive on long-term digitalization, AI, tech take-up, and I believe that there's a continued growth in demand for data center, and I still think Malaysia looks relatively good in ASEAN and even in Asia. So I'm positive on Malaysia data center. It's just the growth that we've seen the last 3 years from very low base is unlikely to be repeated, but still a growing number.
Yeah. Data center, as we mentioned just now, is the underlying physical infrastructure that is supporting the growth of cloud, AI, software as a service and whatnot. So as more of these players expand their footprint in Malaysia, I suppose within the next few years, really hoping that the community, the industry will be able to pick up more on this, and overall in Malaysia will be seeing a lot more people, competent people from not only at the DC space, we have spoken about that just now, but also growing the capabilities in the digital areas, yeah? Enhancing the AI, machine learning, AI, agentic AI and whatnot, capabilities in those areas, software, more advanced software development capabilities and so on. I think that hopefully will also spur not only as a spillover effects also from the data center. That's what I'm hoping for.
Thank you so much for the valuable insights, and our time is up. So would you help me give my panelists a really big hand for what they shared? Thank you.